Hey y'all. Welcome to the Radiance Effect podcast, where the goal is to help you shine from the inside out. I'm your host, Brittany Janelle. Let's get into it. All right, y'all. I'm so excited to talk about today's topic and theme. And I feel like that might be a thing that I continuously keep mentioning, just because when it comes to the overall preparation, I try to be very intentional with what I want to share with you. And one thing that I also want to mention too is when I think about the entire first season and how it was created and the episodes that I'll talk about, it's a continuation and expansion from my book. Now, that's a quick plug for y'all. For those who didn't know, I wrote my first book last year, which was released on my birthday. And if you are interested in supporting, you can look up Brittany Cuts, Cutts, on Barnes & Noble or Amazon. And the book is called Her Light, The Journey Toward Becoming, Defying the Odds, and Moving with Purpose. For those who have read the book, one thing that you may have noticed is that it starts by talking about my upbringing and some of the most impactful moments, and then goes on to talk about my experience as an athlete and coach. It talks about relationships in my love life and so forth, right? But when I think about some of the most impactful moments of what's made me me, I think about the moment that I uncovered what my why is in life. It was 2018 when I got my first big girl job after college. And I remember it like it was yesterday. My first week working there, someone asked me a question, and that question was, "What is your why?" And I'd never been asked that question before, so initially it kind of took me back a little bit, but my response was simple. It was to make money, right? I was like, I'm trying to get to the bag. I got things to buy, right? That's what my mindset was. And I remember walking into the room feeling very inspired my first few weeks, because one thing that I noticed is that written on the wall and on the boards were my coworkers' sales numbers, which highlighted some of the all-time highs. And my thought process was, I can't wait to see Brittany's name on the board. I want to perform. I want to be my best. I want to make money. And I'm also such a visual person. So quickly after I started, I made a mini vision board for work, which included some of the material things I want to purchase once I hit a certain level of success financially, right? Another thing that I want to mention is while working for the staffing company, there were two things that were heavily pushed. That was number one, getting promoted, and number two, doing what's called hitting a contest. And to explain what hitting a contest meant for this organization, it was such a huge deal and such a big achievement, not only in our office and operation, but around the entire organization. It's to kind of explain a level of achievement when it comes to your sales numbers, essentially is what it is. It results in a payout or stock within the company, as well as an all expense paid trip with other contest winners in the organization, as well as direct time with the leadership team. I worked extremely hard. I sacrificed a lot. And within 2.5 years, I was promoted and hit my first contest. As I think about the trip and as I think about that feeling, my first thought was I was so proud to have overcome some of the difficulties to be able to get to that place, and to also be in a room with other people who had also accomplished what I worked so hard for. I remember one day when we were on the trip, there was a segment in which we had a Q&A panel with the leadership team. And I made the bold and scary decision to break the silence, y'all, and speak up and ask a question in front of a room full of people. My stomach was filled with butterflies, but I was like, you know what? We're going to get out of our comfort zone and we're just going to do it. Fast forward to later that evening, I spent time on the yacht. First time doing that. I was enjoying the accomplishment. Those who know me, you know that I'm far from shy. But as I looked around and as I saw everyone else, I started feeling very out of place because I was one of the few people that actually looked like me. I didn't speak the same lingo. I didn't have the same experiences that they were talking about. I was in a space where so many of the individuals were speaking about where they came from, and my experience truly was one of humble beginnings. It was interesting too, just because as I was in that space, one of the things that I recall was wanting to silence my voice just because I didn't feel like other people could relate to me. And I don't know if anyone's listening has ever felt like that, but if you've ever had a time where you feel like other people just aren't going to understand, so you might find yourself starting to isolate, right? And that was definitely me. I remember like it was yesterday. I was standing on the yacht looking at the water, and someone from the leadership team walked up to me and began talking to me. He started explaining his upbringing in the Midwest, and we instantly began to connect based on some of the struggles that he expressed that he went through. We talked about some of the most pivotal moments of my life. And for me, as I thought about it, it was when my family and I lost our home due to arson from a racial hate crime. And I remember that moment and how low I felt during that time and how much fear I had and how I started experiencing things I didn't even know was anxiety at the time. And as the conversation continued, I reflected on the fact of how in many areas of my life, I showed up as an underdog initially. I was never the strongest athlete. I wasn't the smartest student. I wasn't the person who had the best sales. But I realized and reflected on the fact that I was someone who always worked extremely hard to overcome and perform to be better than how I started. Another thing that he asked me, he said, "What caused you to put yourself out there like that? What caused you to ask a question when no one else was asking questions?" And for me, it was, I have this opportunity, so I'm going to take advantage of it. I'm not going to play it safe just because this is where I'm comfortable. I want to prove to myself that there's more out there, and I'm going to seize the moment, and I'm going to learn, I'm going to grow, and I'm going to try to become better. Then I was asked, what makes you a proven person? And I'm sitting here thinking like, dang, you asking a whole lot of questions. And when he asked me that question, y'all, I thought about my little vision board and my first week with this organization. And I remember the response I gave back then, and I was ready for it. I was like, my why is I want to make money, and I'm going to prove that I can do it. Right? I think I kind of missed the whole concept of what he was asking me in the moment because I was so surface level at that point, right? And he was trying to get me to go a little bit deeper so that I can understand what truly causes me to push. How am I motivated? What motivates me? After I gave that response, I was immediately challenged a bit. And I quickly realized that the story that I shared with him had nothing to do with money. So he asked me again, what makes you a proven person? What's your why? I paused this time and said, when I think about how my parents sacrificed for me when we nearly lost everything, and as I think about how they were resilient when times got tough, I took away that lesson, and so much of what I eventually done became about wanting to make them proud and to prove that despite how hard times were, that what they instilled in me still stays. I then thought about my years coaching and how for half of it, I would work 60 to 70-hour weeks about 7 months out of the year. I juggled working full time, going to school full time, practices, games, and competitions. And I remember people would often ask me, Brittany, why not just stop? Why don't you put this behind you? Why don't you focus on other things? But it's something that kept driving me to it. It's something that kept me pushing. And I also thought that I wanted my athletes to know that even when they're challenged in life, because as you get older, you realize that life be life and things aren't always easy. But I wanted them to know that they truly could make it through anything and that they could overcome and that they could always find ways to move forward and achieve. I'm someone who has always had a big heart for people. And in uncovering my why, it helped me to uncover my purpose, which is paying it forward. I mentioned about my parents, and I also mentioned about the conversation with the person at work and them asking me my why. And that made me want to challenge other people to think more deeply about their life and what makes them them and how they're motivated, right? I feel like my purpose is to pour into other people and to try to create change and make a difference. So as I've taken the time to share my experiences with you and a portion of the why, which led to my purpose, I want to flip this on you and I want to ask you that same question. I know y'all listening to me and that this is not an actual conversation, but let's pretend. And if you're able, when I ask this question, I want you to respond. Maybe that means you might even have to pause this podcast and write it down. Maybe that means you might have to take a few moments to reflect on it, to be able to give a response. But I want you to think about it and I want you to answer the question, what's your why? As you responded, now let me take it a step deeper and I want to ask you, why is that your why? And that may sound silly, right? To ask another question after I just asked you that question. But one thing that you may realize is that I'll open the show by saying, welcome to the Radiance Effect podcast, where the goal is to help you shine from the inside out. When it comes to being able to shine, a portion of that is living in your truth and truly understanding what makes you you. My initial why was to make money. So I thought, right? But that really wasn't true. That was just the result of my why. But it was truly way deeper than that. Maybe someone's why is to have abundance financially. But I want you to ask yourself, why is that? Maybe it could be you were someone who experienced abuse throughout life. And you may eventually have a goal of being so focused on having the finances to be able to help others who are in similar situations. Your why could end up being something that's going to fuel you into your purpose. Maybe you're passionate about promoting health and fitness. What's the why behind that? Maybe it could be something like you grew up and you saw your loved ones have health challenges, and now your goal is to be an advocate when it comes to health and fitness. I'm not sure, right? I'm coming up with random examples of what it could be. But the reason that I challenge you to think about this is because our experiences shape us far more than what we realize. There's meaning behind your experiences, and there's so much purpose behind your challenges if you allow it. The first step is getting so deep to a level with yourself and asking the tough questions that you begin to understand what's made you you. And this is just the first of many conversations that we will have surrounding purpose. And if you've taken anything from this, I encourage you to even have the conversations with those that you care about. Ask them, what is their why? The conversations may actually surprise you. And for those who are out there listening, I just want you to know that as you start to uncover what your why is, your why can be something that causes you to keep going and to keep pushing. I know this topic talked about a lot of my experiences related to work and to coaching, but I remember when times were really, really tough for me and when I wanted to give up and when I didn't feel like I could keep pressing forward and maneuver to become resilient throughout life in general, I eventually had to start leaning on my why. And that's something that has continued to propel me to move forward when it comes to even making the right decisions. I remember being here in Houston and I was nervous about applying for this mentor program. Even though I had coached for years, even though I was a junior achievement teacher for a fifth grade class back home, even though I had many of these experiences, there were things that kept telling me that I couldn't do it. There were things that kept telling me that maybe this wasn't the right lane for me. But I had to think about my why. And my why was I love being able to impact people. I love being able to pour into people. For me personally, I was very passionate. I'm still very passionate about inspiring and pouring into teen girls. So why wouldn't I do it, right? When I was able to uncover and understand what my why was, it's allowed me to be able to make the right decisions, even when my mind would try to tell me that I wasn't good enough, even when my mind would try to tell me that I wasn't qualified. The same goes for when I wrote a book. I had no clue what I was doing. If I'm being honest with you, I had to do a lot of researching. I didn't think that I had the qualifications to become an author. And sometimes it's still kind of crazy to me. I'm like, wow, I actually did this. But when I think about the reason behind it, it was because I felt that it could potentially help other people, which is a portion of my why and some of the things that I'm passionate about. So that's why I really hope that you take the time to share this episode with somebody else. And I really hope that you take the time to understand what your why is and that could be something that keeps you moving throughout your journey in life. All right, y'all. That's it for today's episode of the Radiance Effect podcast. I hope that this episode encourages you to ask the tough questions, to be honest with yourself, to find meaning in your past, to help guide your future, and to live intentionally with your why in mind. Be sure to follow the show on your platform of choice on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. New episodes will air every first and third Monday at 7 p.m. Until next time, bye.